The Rochester Symphony presents From Death to Life, featuring pianist Andrew Stopey, and conducted by Maestro Jerry Lance, performed at Lourdes High School. The Rochester Symphony Orchestra was founded in 1920, almost 100 years ago, by two fellows named Will and Charlie Mayo, who wanted to have an orchestra in the town where they wanted to build a great clinic. And so they sponsored it all their lives until they died in 1939. We find our musicians, less than half of them are from Rochester or the immediate area. Most of them come from a greater distance. They come from Northfield, they come from Austin, they come from Wisconsin, Iowa, and many from the Twin Cities. And if we have an opening, then we announce it. We announced an opening for principal trombone last summer. We had 8 people from all around the region come, all very good trombonists. We audition them behind screens, the professional way, so that those of us who are hearing the auditions don't see who they are, and then we select them that way when we hope they work well into the orchestra. Anyone can audition each year, even if we don't need that particular instrument at the time, and we're most often in need of string instruments like violins, violas, cellos, but we keep their names in case we need a substitute, and we often need to refer to that list. The standard orchestra concert starts with an overture, which is usually, it's the prelude to the concert as it were, and it's usually the prelude to a musical event or an opera or something else from the past. Then the feature artist plays the concerto, the solo piece with the orchestra, and the second half is usually dedicated to a major symphony. That's the standard procedure, the standard format for an orchestra concert: overture, concerto, symphony. And of course, in the modern world, we're trying to change that. In this particular concert, we do a concerto, a tone poem, then another featured solo piece like in concerto, and finally the overture at the end. It's crazy. We've broken the standard pattern, but that's what the 21st century is about. We're doing a very strange thing in this concert. We started the concert with a concerto. I've never seen a concert that started with a concerto, and we're ending it with the overture, which is what a concert usually begins with. Are we crazy? It's just that the concerto leaps off the screen so much we thought that would be a great way to start. And we needed something after Totentanz, which leaves us with death, to kind of get out of there and go on to glory. And no composer can lead you from death to life, from sadness to glory, as Beethoven can. Now, what was Beethoven doing in writing Lenore Overture number 3? What about numbers 1 and 2? Well, actually, he wrote a total of 4 overtures for his one opera. Beethoven simply wasn't very talented at opera, but he wrote it 3 different times. The first time he wrote it, he used an overture that got known later as Lenore number 2, because people in the later generations thought it had been written second. It's a good overture. When he rewrote it a year later, he wrote his true masterpiece, what may be the greatest overture ever written by anybody, Lenore number 3. That was his second version. The following year, he did another kind of revision, but he didn't finish it and never got performed. That was Lenore number 1, and the less said about that, the better. And finally, another 8 years later, in 1815, he rewrites it for the 3rd time, changes it greatly, and writes an overture entirely different, of a much lighter character that doesn't have the problems that the other overtures had. What were the other problems with the other overtures? Number 1, they were too serious. Number 2, they were too long. Number 3, they told too much of the story. And in fact, in Lenore number 3, the one we're doing, there's a bugle call near the end where you hear the rescue come. And if you've heard already the rescue before you see the opera, there's no sense in seeing it. You've got the whole story already. So it didn't work as a prelude to the opera, but it works wonderfully telling the story of Florestan, a man who has been imprisoned because he spoke up, he spoke the truth to power, and he got thrown in jail. His wife, Leonora, takes the name of Fidelio, the faithful one, and becomes an assistant jailer in the prison where Florestan is imprisoned. And she realizes that he's going to be killed by the dictator that put him down there, but then just before he's going to be killed, they hear the trumpet announcing the arrival of the troops. Yes, the cavalry has come to the rescue, and his life is saved. It's called a rescue opera, something very popular in the early 1800s around Europe. In our version, we hear that wonderful trumpet call, and then the music goes to glory and furiously fast at the end, and Beethoven he starts the overture in the tune, he raises it out to glory at the end. And everyone, I hope, is happy, and we've gone from death to life.
Beethoven can write music, thank God, but he can do nothing else on earth.
Ludwig van Beethoven was one of the world's greatest music composers, and he remains a household name to this day. Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany in 1770. The course of his lifelong relationship with music was set at an early age by his overbearing and alcoholic father. Young Ludwig had a talent for performing music, and his father tried to capitalize on that, just as an earlier child prodigy, Wolfgang Mozart, had done. On posters promoting his first public performance, Beethoven's father claimed that Ludwig was 6 years old. Beethoven was actually 7. Beethoven continued to study music and moved from Bonn, Germany to Vienna, Austria when he was almost 22. The renowned composer Joseph Haydn became his teacher.
I only live in my music, and I have scarcely begun one thing when I start on another. As I am now working, I am often engaged on 3 or 4 things at the same time.
There are considered to be 3 main stages of development in Beethoven's music. His first stage was influenced heavily by the classical period music style of Mozart and Haydn. His second stage includes works that are much wider in scope, and that express heroism and struggle. It is thought that the impetus for this period came from Beethoven's discovery that he was going deaf.
Often, I can scarcely hear anyone speaking to me. The tones, yes, but not the actual words. Yet as soon as anyone shouts, it is unbearable. What will come of all this? Heaven only knows.
Beethoven struggled with depression, and he contemplated suicide as a result of his worsening deafness. Beethoven's final music period began after he was deaf. His music from this stage is characterized by intellectual depth and formal innovations, exhibiting more of a romantic period style. Ludwig van Beethoven died in 1827 at the age of 56. On his deathbed, Beethoven said,
"Applaud, my friends. The comedy is over."
His life might be over, but his music remains with us to this day.
This concludes the Rochester Symphony Orchestra's concert From Death to Life. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you their next performance, an opera affair featuring the Rochester Symphony Orchestra Chorale. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. The Rochester Symphony Orchestra Presents is a co-production of KSMQ Public Television, the Rochester Symphony Orchestra and Chorale, and Rochester Symphonic Vision Productions.